Today we're going to read Magic Treehouse Merlin Missions number 22, Hurry Up Houdini, Chapter 9. This is called The Real Story, with Peyton and our cat, Miss Jingles, will be joining us today. After the curtain closed, Jack could hear the joyful crowd leaving the theater. Mr. Dewey, Mr. Wilson, Butch, and Hank rushed from the wings to congratulate the Houdinis. Mr. Dewey actually went down on his knees to thank them. "You have made my audience very happy," he exclaimed. "And when my audience is happy, I am happy too." "Great show, great show." "Man, he's really lost it," Jack said. Annie laughed. "Come on, I want to tell them great show too," she said. But as Jack and Annie started towards the Houdinis, some teenage boys rushed on stage ahead of them. "Sorry, boys," said Mr. Wilson, stepping between the boys and the Houdinis. "Mr. Houdini is exhausted from his magnificent performance." What does exhausted mean?
Like, very tired.
"You'll have to buy a ticket and come back again." "Come on, Harry, let's get you two out of here," Mr. Dewey said. As Mr. Dewey whisked Harry and Bess backstage, Jack and Annie followed them. Mr. Dewey ushered the couple into their dressing room. He hurried in after them and closed the door. Annie was about to knock, but Jack stopped her. "Don't bother them yet," he said. "Let them relax a minute first. We'll see them when they come out." "Good idea," said Annie. Jack and Annie waited outside the Houdini's dressing room as the crew cleared all the hooligan fans off the stage. They waited as Hank and Butch took away Houdini's cabinet, his milk can, and his steamer trunk. They waited as Mrs. Crenshaw collected the bird and rabbit cages and carried them away. They waited as Mr. Wilson swept the floor and turned off the stage lights. "They should be relaxed by now," said Annie. "No kidding," said Jack. He tapped softly on the door. There was no answer. Annie knocked louder. "Bess? Harry?" she called. Still no one answered. Annie tried the handle, but the door was locked. "They're gone," said Mr. Wilson, passing by Jack and Annie in the hall. "Gone?" said Annie. "Yes, both the Houdinis left a while ago," the stage manager said. "Left? How?" asked Jack. He and Annie had been watching the door every minute. "Mr. Dewey took them through the secret exit out of the Stars' dressing room," said Mr. Wilson. "It goes through the basement and out of the theater. Otherwise, they'd be mobbed by all the crazy fans." "So they're really gone?" said Jack. "They don't call Harry the master of escape for nothing," Mr. Wilson said. "You'd better change out of your costumes and get going too. We'll be locking up the building soon." Jack and Annie walked down the hall and into the dressing room. "I can't believe it," Annie wailed. "We didn't even get to tell them the great show." "Worse than that, we didn't get to find out a secret of greatness," said Jack. He held up his finger with the ring of truth. The ring didn't glow all night. "Well, I guess all we can do is get dressed and go look for them," said Annie. Jack and Annie quickly changed out of the tuxedos and back into their street clothes. Jack grabbed his bag and put his watch in the pocket of his pants. "Come on, hurry," said Annie. She and Jack rushed out the back door of the theater. They ran down the dark alley, past the row of garbage cans, and out to the street. Surf Avenue was still bright with lights and just as busy as before. The sidewalks were still crowded with lots of people. The old-timey cars and horses and buggies filled the cobbled street. "They could be anywhere," said Jack. "They could even have gone home." "Let's try Luna Park," said Annie. "Why would they go back there?" asked Jack, "especially after getting trapped on their trip to the moon." "I don't know. There's lots they might want to do there," said Annie. She gasped. "Ice cream!" Jack and Annie said together. At the same moment, they'd each remembered Bess saying, "Ice cream always comes after the show." "To the ice cream stand," said Annie. "And fast," said Jack. Jack and Annie took off up the street, dodging people along the way. They ran to the tall arches where ticket sellers and chariots were still welcoming people into Luna Park. "Admission 10 cents each," one said. Jack and Annie dumped the rest of their pennies into the ticket sellers' hands. Then they took off, dashing up the broad avenue, weaving around couples and children and barkers on stilts and unicycles. What does it mean, broad avenue? What's broad mean?
Like, wide?
Wide. When they came to the ice cream stand, they found a line of people waiting to buy cones. Panting, Jack looked up and down the aisle. The two Houdinis were nowhere to be seen. Jack's spirits fell, but Annie poked him. What? Jack said. Annie pointed at the terrace. Jack looked up. Harry and Bess were sitting on a bench side by side holding ice cream cones. Their big hats hid their faces. Jack laughed. Now I get it. They wear those hats so fans won't recognize them, he said. Well, they can't fool us, said Annie. Come on. Annie and Jack headed over to the bench. There's a picture of Jack and Annie running along the boardwalk and see the people
I can't see it because it's changing.
in the old-timey looking clothes. When they were close, Annie put her finger to her lips. Jack understood what she meant. Without greeting Harry or Bess, Jack and Annie sat down next to them. Great ice cream, huh? Said Annie. Great, said Bess, not looking up. Would you call it the greatest in the world? Asked Jack. Tilting her head, Bess peeked out from under the brim of her hat. She laughed loudly. Hey, Harry, look, she exclaimed. It's our little friends. Harry raised his hat, then laughed too. The crazy kiddos, he said. So what's the story? What are you two doing up on the stage tonight? What were you doing up on the stage tonight? We just love to perform, said Annie with a giggle. We just love to make fools of ourselves, said Jack. Making a fool of yourself is a brave thing to do, Harry said, smiling. That's what Aristotle once told us, said Annie, more or less. Jack glanced at the ring of truth. It wasn't glowing. Mr. Houdini, someone said. A man stood in front of the bench. He started to clap. Oh, dear, murmured Bess. You were unbelievable tonight, the man said. I never saw anything like what you did. Other people turned to look. They recognized Harry, too, and began gathering in front of the bench, telling him how great he was. Harry finished his ice cream cone. Then he stood up and started shaking hands with his admirers. Bess shook her head and sighed. He's always nice to people, she said to Jack and Annie, no matter how tired he is. Harry's fans kept asking questions. How did you do it? How did you escape from those handcuffs? How did you get out of that milk can? First of all, let me assure you again that I have no supernatural power, said Harry. It's all illusion. These skills just happen to come easily to me. Always have. I remember when I was a kid. Jack looked at the ring of truth. Nothing. That's not the real story, Bess said quietly to Jack and Annie, her eyes twinkling. What is the real story? Annie asked her. Harry's always worked very, very hard, she said. He's worked all his life. When he was a little boy, he sold newspapers and flowers. He performed in a neighborhood children's circus. A few years later, he hopped trains and tried to get work in Milwaukee, Kansas City, New York. He practiced coin tricks and card tricks for hours every day. He read every book he could find on magic. He practiced and practiced and practiced. Those skills did not come naturally to him. They came from hard work and more practice than most people could endure. Jack thought about how he and Annie had only done their magic tricks once, with the help of the magic mist. No wonder they'd failed so spectacularly the second time. So his secret is hard work? Said Annie. You got it, kiddo, said Bess. But that's not such a big secret, is it? Anyone would have to work hard to be truly great at something. Yeah, they would, said Jack. Oh, how? Annie whispered to Jack. She pointed at his hand. Jack looked down and smiled. The ring of truth was finally glowing. There's the ring of truth. So what was the secret?
Like hard work.
Hard work.